Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a name you absolutely know, but I guarantee we're going to look at him in a totally different way. Leonardo da Vinci. We're not just talking about the historical figure here, or the guy who painted the Mona Lisa. We're looking at the ultimate case study in how to think completely without boundaries. If you've ever wondered what a truly integrated mind looks like, well, you're in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this with a seemingly simple question. Was Leonardo da Vinci an artist or was he a scientist? We live in a world that absolutely loves putting things into neat little boxes, right? You're either the creative type or you're the analytical type. But trying to apply that modern, compartmentalized view to da Vinci's mind, that's a massive mistake. When you look at his notebooks, dividing his genius up into these isolated silos just totally misses the magic of how his brain actually worked.
Check out this quote from our source material. The boundaries between art, science, and technological innovation were not merely blurred, but actively dissolved. Actively dissolved. That is such a powerful distinction. He wasn't just casually dabbling in different fields on the weekends. His genius lived precisely in his ability to take completely disparate threads of knowledge and weave them together into this stunning, cohesive worldview. So how did he actually pull this off? Let's get right into Section 1, Context of a Polymath, and take a look at the Renaissance era.
Let's quickly run through his timeline. He was born in 1452 in Vinci. And what's wild is that being born out of wedlock actually gave him this incredible freedom. He was totally spared from the rigid expectations of his family's lineage. By the 1460s, he's apprenticing in Florence under Verrocchio. Now, this wasn't just some stuffy painting studio. It was a buzzing hub of sculpture, goldsmithing, and engineering. It taught him how to create holistically. Jump to the late 1480s, and he moves to Milan to work for Duke Ludovico Sforza. This was a massive game changer, opening the door for huge military and architectural projects. He essentially sent the 15th century equivalent of a tech startup pitch deck to get that job.
But wait, let's rewind just a second back to Florence. The intellectual vibe of the Quattrocento, that's the 15th century, was absolutely electric. You had this huge resurgence of Neoplatonism, mixing mystical and classical thought, plus humanism, putting human potential right at the center of the universe. People were constantly debating philosophy and math. And sure, Leonardo's formal, traditional schooling was actually pretty limited, but this vibrant environment, it was the perfect incubator. His mind just exploded because he was out there talking directly to scholars, absorbing this deep-seated belief that human reason could literally unlock the secrets of the universe.
Which brings us right into Section 2, looking at the core engine of his genius, sapere vedere, or knowing to see.
So the crucial point here is that his entire worldview was anchored by this concept of sapere vedere, knowing how to see. For Leonardo, you were never going to find true knowledge just by blindly nodding along to what ancient authorities said. No way. He believed deep down that you have to directly, empirically observe nature. Experiencing it firsthand was the absolute key to unlocking how things actually work.
He was basically practicing this proto-scientific humanism. He totally rejected ancient dogma because he wanted to see things for himself. If he wanted to know how something ticked, he didn't go to the library and read an old, probably inaccurate text. Instead, he systematically deconstructed the natural phenomenon in front of him. He literally took the world apart with his own two eyes to figure it out. Let's see this in action with our first major case study in Section 3, Anatomy Informing Art. We're going way beyond the surface here.
You have to remember, back then, there were massive social and religious taboos about the human body. Most anatomists just kind of looked at the surface and called it a day. But Leonardo, he was obsessed with verisimilitude, making things look flawlessly real. So he took to doing these radical, totally clandestine dissections of human cadavers. He was actually cutting into bodies in the dead of night to get this incredibly intimate, acute awareness of muscles, tendons, bones, and the whole cardiovascular system.
Let's move to the next point and see how this builds step by step into true artistic mastery. Step 1, he does these secret dissections. Step 2, he maps out exactly how a skull sits or how a muscle contracts. And then step 3, he injects that directly into his art. Look at the Last Supper, the tension in a hand reaching out, the deep sorrow etched on an apostle's face. That's not just a lucky brushstroke. That comes from a profound, literal understanding of what the muscles and bones are doing right under the skin. Same goes for the famously lifelike, enigmatic smile of the Mona Lisa.
And hey, his science didn't stop at anatomy. He went deep into optics and perspective, which directly led to him inventing the technique of sfumato. Basically, sfumato is the subtle blending of tones that creates soft, hazy outlines and just incredible atmospheric depth. It's what gives his figures that ghostly three-dimensional presence. Plus, his intense studies of botany and geology, that's what gave us those hyper-accurate natural landscapes in paintings like The Virgin of the Rocks. His science literally powered his art.
But the knowledge flowed both ways. Let's move into Section 4, Engineering Nature, and check out some of his practical applications.
And this brilliantly illustrates how his mind worked. He'd watch a natural phenomenon, take it apart in his head, and then try to build a mechanical version of it. So he studies how bird wings articulate, right? Boom, that turns into designs for ornithopters, these crazy machines using human power to flap wings. He studies wind currents, which leads to gliders. He obsesses over river flow and fluid dynamics, and suddenly he's designing advanced canals, pumping systems, and hydraulic locks. It is all connected.
Then there's his staggering output of military engineering. Remember that pitch to Duke Sforza we talked about earlier? When he applied for the job, he actually pitched himself as a military engineer first and a painter second. He's conceptualizing armored vehicles with rotating cannons, basically 15th century tanks. He's drawing up advanced siege engines, catapults, early machine guns, and these massively complex hoists and cranes. The sheer volume of tactical, pragmatic engineering is honestly hard to wrap your head around.
He envisioned possibilities that completely transcended the technological limits of his day. We have to keep in mind, Leonardo didn't have the advanced metallurgy or the power sources to actually build most of the stuff, but his mind was so adaptive, so highly iterative, that he was laying the physical and conceptual groundwork for things that wouldn't actually exist for centuries. He was quite literally living in the future.
So, we've got the master artist and the visionary engineer. To really grasp who Leonardo da Vinci was, we need to tie all these threads together in Section 5, The Interconnected World, focusing on his vision of a unified reality.
A massive piece of his philosophy was this concept of virtù. Now, in this context, virtù means skill, power, and inherent quality. It's this beautiful idea that if you can truly understand the underlying mechanics of nature, you can harness those forces to do remarkable things. But he wasn't out to conquer nature, he wanted to master it by copying its efficiency and elegance. For him, the sheer beauty of the world was just a direct reflection of its perfect underlying order.
Now, what's really interesting about this realization is its profound simplicity. He honestly believed that the exact same physical principles governed how water flows, how birds fly, and how blood circulates in our veins. Art, science, engineering, they weren't separate disciplines to him. They were just different sides of the exact same unified reality. Because he saw the world this holistically, he was making brilliant connections that literally everyone else missed. I mean, he was using his knowledge of river currents to map out the human cardiovascular system. How cool is that? Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative question. If Leonardo da Vinci, undeniably one of the greatest minds in the history of our species, saw absolutely no boundaries between art, science, and engineering, why do we? His ultimate legacy isn't just a beautiful painting or a sketch of a helicopter. It is the raw power of a fully integrated, multifaceted mind. It's a challenge for all of us to stop putting our learning into boxes, to start looking at the world directly, and to finally dissolve those boundaries in our own minds. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it completely changes the way you look at the world today.